See that the
Queen Camilla
photographers
demanded a
remain
salute
behind
from
the
the royal
barrier, would
guard.
you?
What she got
It's
instead left her
important they don't
humiliated.
obstruct the view of the
Even though
carriage.
she had attended countless official events over the years, today felt different. There was a sense of excitement in the air, a mixture of pride and expectation that made her pulse quicken. Today she would inspect the royal guard, one of the most esteemed units in the kingdom, known for their perfect discipline, polished uniforms, and unwavering loyalty to the crown. The thought of standing before them, observing their precision, filled her with a mix of anticipation and responsibility. Dressed in a regal outfit that combined tradition with her personal sense of style, Queen Camilla looked at herself in the mirror. Her attire was elegant but not ostentatious, a carefully chosen ensemble meant to convey dignity, authority, and approachability all at once. She adjusted her gloves, smoothing out the creases, and checked the small details. The alignment of her jewelry, the shine of her shoes, and the posture of her shoulders. Every detail mattered. Every detail reflected not just her personal style, but the centuries-old heritage she represented. As she prepared to leave, her aides entered, quietly discussing the schedule for the day. They reminded her of the ceremony's traditions, the history of the royal guard, and the expectations for every moment. Camilla listened politely, but with a focus that suggested she already knew what to expect. She had seen guards perform countless times, had watched the ceremonial drills, and had attended events where precision was everything. But this was different. This was her moment, and she wanted it to be perfect. The drive to the palace was quiet, with only the hum of the engine and the occasional exchange of polite words between her and her aides. Camilla gazed out the window, observing the city streets slowly coming to life. Children in school uniforms hurried along the sidewalks, vendors set up their morning stalls, and tourists already carried cameras, eager to capture glimpses of the royal presence. To the outside world, this was another routine visit, another ceremonial appearance. But in her mind, Queen Camilla was mentally walking through every step of the upcoming inspection. She pictured the line of guards standing tall, their expressions serious, their movements synchronized. She imagined the perfect salute, the crisp echo of commands, and the feeling of pride swelling in her chest as she acknowledged their loyalty. As she arrived at the palace, the grandeur of the surroundings struck her. The historic building, with its towering columns, ornate decorations, and meticulously maintained gardens, seemed to whisper stories of centuries past. Each stone carried memories of royal ceremonies, triumphs, and challenges. Camilla's footsteps echoed softly as she walked across the polished marble floors, her mind reflecting on the legacy she was a part of. She thought about the generations of royals before her who had stood in her place, the weight of expectations they carried, and the delicate balance between tradition and personal presence that defined their role. When she reached the courtyard where the royal guard was assembled, she paused for a moment. The sight was breathtaking. Hundreds of guards stood in perfect formation, their uniforms spotless, their expressions disciplined. Each soldier held their ceremonial weapons with care, their polished helmets reflecting the sunlight. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The guards were waiting for her acknowledgement, and she was ready to observe every detail with a discerning eye. Her heart beat faster, not out of fear, but from the thrill of being part of a living tradition, one that connected the past to the present in a seamless display of ceremony and respect. As she walked toward the line of guards, Camilla's mind wandered briefly to the stories she had heard about ceremonial errors and how even the most disciplined units could have small lapses. She reminded herself that today was not just about perfection, but about presence. Every movement she made, every glance she shared would be noticed. Every detail contributed to the impression of the monarchy as a symbol of stability, dignity, and order. She felt a surge of determination. Today, she would witness tradition in action, and she would do so with grace, composure, and awareness. The guards, sensing her approach, adjusted their stance subtly. Their boots tapped lightly against the ground as they shifted weight, the crisp sound a testament to their training. Camilla observed quietly, noting the straight backs, the alignment of their ranks, and the precision with which each soldier held their ceremonial weapon. There was a rhythm to it, a harmony that spoke of countless hours of practice, discipline, and dedication. She admired their commitment, understanding that their role went beyond ceremonial appearances. They embodied the values and strength of the institution they served. As she moved closer, her aides fell back slightly, allowing her to take the lead in the ceremonial proceedings. Camilla's steps were deliberate, each one measured, reflecting the importance of the moment. She could feel the gaze of the guards on her, not in challenge, but in respect and attentiveness. Their silence was powerful, a testament to their training and the seriousness with which they regarded their duty. She felt a mixture of pride and anticipation, a readiness to engage with the ceremony while maintaining the poise expected of her role. She raised her hand slightly, signaling her acknowledgement of their presence. The gesture was small, but it carried immense significance. To the guards, it was a recognition of their dedication. To the courtiers and spectators, it was a demonstration of the respect and authority inherent in her position. Camilla's eyes scanned the line, observing the subtle differences in posture, the way each soldier maintained focus, and the unity that bound them together. It was a moment of quiet reflection amidst the ceremonial grandeur, a reminder that behind every polished uniform and disciplined movement, there was human effort, training, and pride. As the initial moments passed, Camilla allowed herself a brief smile, one that acknowledged both the guards' discipline and the weight of her role. She felt the history around her, the centuries of tradition, and the expectations that came with it. Yet she also felt a sense of personal connection. This was not just about observing a ceremony. It was about participating in a living tradition, one that demanded awareness, respect, and presence. Every detail mattered, from the alignment of a helmet to the subtle shift of weight in a stance. Every element contributed to the story being told, a story of loyalty, service, and continuity. Camilla took a deep breath, steadying herself for the moments ahead. She was aware that the day would be recorded, observed, and analyzed. Every movement, every glance, every gesture would be noticed by aides, courtiers, and perhaps even the public. Yet she felt ready. The preparation, the anticipation, and the careful attention to detail had all led to this moment. The royal guard, standing tall and proud, represented not just the monarchy but the values it upheld: discipline, honor, and commitment. Camilla understood that her presence added meaning to their display, and that the ceremony was a shared experience, a connection between the crown and those who served it with unwavering dedication. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting a warm glow across the courtyard, Queen Camilla felt a sense of calm determination. She was ready to engage with the ceremony, to observe, to acknowledge, and to participate with dignity. The guards stood at attention, their polished boots reflecting the sunlight, their expressions disciplined and focused. Every detail, from the alignment of their weapons to the rhythm of their movements, spoke of preparation, tradition, and commitment. Camilla's heart swelled with a mix of pride and responsibility. She was part of a long line of royals who had stood in her place, carrying the weight of history with grace and presence. In that moment, surrounded by centuries of tradition, Queen Camilla understood the significance of her role, not just as a figurehead, but as a participant in a living ceremony that connected the past to the present. Every detail mattered, every movement had meaning, and every glance conveyed respect and authority. The anticipation of what was to come, the careful observation of the guards, and the awareness of her own presence created a sense of quiet intensity. This was the moment she had prepared for, and she was ready to embrace it fully, with dignity, composure, and awareness of the living tradition she was a part of. Queen Camilla had taken a slow, deliberate step toward the line of royal guards, the polished marble courtyard. Stretching out under the morning sun, the anticipation in the air was almost tangible, a quiet energy that seemed to hum between the rows of soldiers. Their crisp uniforms reflected the light, the brass buttons shining as if polished by the dedication and care that went into their daily routine. Camilla's eyes scanned the line carefully, noting the subtle shifts of weight, the straightness of backs, and the precise alignment of helmets. Everything had to be perfect. She raised her hand in the traditional gesture of acknowledgement, a simple movement that carried centuries of history. The guards, sensing her attention, remained poised, yet there was a subtle tension in the air. This was no ordinary inspection. It was a moment that showcased the very heart of royal discipline, the seamless balance between personal pride and institutional expectation. Camilla's gaze lingered on the first row, moving slowly, deliberately down the line. Each soldier was unique, yet together they formed a perfect visual of loyalty and precision. As she approached the center of the formation, the ceremonial band, positioned nearby, played a soft, measured tune. The music was not loud, but it added a rhythm to the scene, a heartbeat that matched the careful movements of the guards. Camilla listened intently, her head slightly tilted as she appreciated the harmony between the music and the soldiers' poised stance. She could feel the weight of expectation settling gently on her shoulders, the knowledge that everyone present was watching, that every detail would be noted and remembered. The Queen's hand hovered briefly in the salute position, a gesture both simple and profound. It was meant to command respect, to acknowledge the guards' service, and to connect her presence to the centuries-old traditions of the monarchy. Camilla's eyes met the first soldier's, a young man whose posture was impeccable but whose eyes betrayed a trace of nervousness. She offered a faint, reassuring smile. It was a subtle acknowledgement, a way of saying that she recognized his effort and dedication. In return, the soldier stiffened slightly, as if bolstered by the recognition, yet trying not to let any emotion break the disciplined facade. Moving further along, Camilla noticed small details. The tilt of a helmet, the way a glove fit over a hand, the careful positioning of a ceremonial weapon. To an untrained eye, these might have seemed minor, inconsequential even. But to Camilla, they were a testament to the care, effort, and precision that went into every aspect of the royal guard's appearance. She appreciated the dedication it took to maintain such uniformity, to present an image that was both dignified and inspiring. Each detail told a story of discipline, loyalty, and a connection to the history of the monarchy. As she reached the center of the formation, Camilla's focus sharpened. This was the moment of inspection, the part of the ceremony that required absolute presence. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and allowed her eyes to move carefully from soldier to soldier. The guards, in turn, remained at attention, their expressions serious and unwavering. There was a sense of quiet understanding between the Queen and the guards, a recognition that each person had a role to play in the ceremony, that every movement, every glance, and every subtle shift had significance. Camilla's thoughts wandered briefly to the history of the royal guard, imagining the countless ceremonies that had taken place over the centuries. Kings and queens before her had stood in the same courtyard, observing the same formations, acknowledging the same dedication. She thought about the stories that had been passed down, the moments of triumph, the rare mistakes, the stories of loyalty and courage that had become part of the legend of the monarchy. She felt a connection to those moments, a sense of continuity that stretched back through generations, linking her presence to a long line of royal tradition. She lifted her hand slightly higher, preparing for the formal salute. It was a gesture loaded with meaning, one that symbolized respect, recognition, and authority. Camilla expected the guards to respond in perfect unison, a display of training, precision, and shared understanding. For a moment, everything seemed aligned perfectly. The music, the guards, the sunlight reflecting off polished surfaces. It was as if time itself had slowed, allowing the moment to stretch, to be savored, and to be appreciated in all its ceremonial beauty. But then, Camilla noticed a small irregularity. One of the soldiers in the middle of the formation raised his hand slightly later than the others. It was a tiny lapse, almost imperceptible, but in the context of such a disciplined display, it stood out. Camilla's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, not in anger, but in a careful observation. Mistakes, even minor ones, could disrupt the perfection of the ceremony. She allowed herself a brief pause, considering how she would respond, while the rest of the guards remained poised and disciplined. The moment passed quickly, yet it created a ripple of subtle tension. Another soldier, noticing the first soldier's slight delay, adjusted his stance mid-salute, creating a brief, almost imperceptible hesitation in the line. Camilla, maintaining her composure, continued to observe, her eyes moving from soldier to soldier. Her mind catalogued each detail, the slight shift in posture, the timing of movements, the way soldiers adjusted to maintain the appearance of unity. She understood that even minor lapses were human, but the ceremonial expectation demanded near perfection. As she continued along the line, Camilla felt a mix of emotions: pride in the majority of soldiers who performed flawlessly, concern for the few minor lapses, and anticipation of what would come next. The guards had been trained for years, Yet even the most disciplined units were not immune to small errors under the gaze of royalty and cameras. She reminded herself to maintain calm and grace, to acknowledge their dedication without reacting harshly to small mistakes. The ceremony was as much about presence and composure as it was about precision. Camilla paused for a moment to observe a soldier whose uniform was impeccable, whose movements were flawless, and whose expression conveyed a quiet sense of pride. She allowed herself a faint smile, a silent acknowledgement of the effort and dedication it took to reach that level of discipline. The soldier, in turn, met her gaze with a slight nod, a subtle but meaningful connection between observer and observed. It was these small moments, these exchanges of recognition, that gave the ceremony depth and humanity beyond the rigid formality. The Queen's attention then shifted to the ceremonial band. Their instruments glinted in the sunlight, and their fingers moved with practiced skill, producing a melody that complemented the rhythm of the guards' movements. Camilla listened carefully, appreciating the harmony between music and movement, the way sound and sight combined to create an immersive ceremonial experience. She understood that every element, the uniforms, the posture, the weapons, the music, worked together to convey a message of discipline, pride, and continuity. As she walked further down the line, Camilla noticed the smallest details: the alignment of gloves, the shine of boots, the careful positioning of ceremonial swords. These were not mere accessories. They were symbols of tradition and dedication, representing countless hours of practice and preparation. Each detail contributed to the story being told in that courtyard, a story of loyalty, service, and continuity. Camilla felt a deep sense of respect for the guards and the traditions they upheld, understanding that her presence added meaning to their display. The Queen lifted her hand higher, signaling the formal salute. This was the moment she had anticipated, the peak of the ceremonial acknowledgement. She expected a precise, unified response, a display of discipline and respect that would reflect the dedication of the royal guard. Yet as her hand reached the highest point, a subtle misalignment became evident. One soldier's arm was slightly behind, another's glove was not perfectly straight. The imperfection was minor, almost invisible to the untrained eye, yet in the context of ceremonial expectation, it stood out. Camilla's mind raced briefly, considering how to respond without breaking the composure that was expected of her role. She reminded herself that the guards were human, that small mistakes were inevitable, and that her reaction could set the tone for the remainder of the ceremony. Maintaining dignity, grace, and presence was as important as the precision of the salute itself. She allowed a faint, neutral expression to settle on her face, a mask of calm observation that acknowledged the minor errors without drawing undue attention to them. The guards, sensing her composed response, adjusted subtly, their movements becoming more synchronized again. Camilla continued to move along the line, her gaze careful and deliberate. She took note of the discipline, the pride, and the dedication displayed, even in the presence of minor lapses. The ceremony was a living tradition, a combination of human effort, history, and ritual that required patience, understanding, and respect. Camilla felt a renewed sense of connection to the history she represented, recognizing that her presence added significance to the moment. By the time she reached the end of the formation, the initial tension had eased. The guards stood at attention, their movements more aligned, their expressions disciplined, and their posture reflecting a return to unity. Camilla allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction, appreciating the overall dedication and skill displayed. The minor lapses had not diminished the ceremony. Rather, they had added a touch of humanity, a reminder that even in the most disciplined settings, human effort was at the core of every tradition. As the ceremonial music reached a gentle pause, Camilla lowered her hand from the salute, her expression composed and serene. She had observed the royal guard with care, acknowledged their dedication, and maintained the poise expected of her role. The moment had been intense, yet rewarding, a demonstration of both human effort and centuries-old tradition. She understood that ceremonies like this were not merely displays of discipline. They were connections to history, expressions of pride, and affirmations of loyalty and service. Walking back toward her aides, Camilla allowed herself a moment to reflect on the experience. She had witnessed precision, minor imperfections, and the dedication that bound the royal guard together. Every detail had mattered, from the alignment of gloves to the subtle adjustments in posture. She felt a sense of pride, not only in the soldiers who served with excellence but also in the continuity of tradition, the enduring symbolism of the monarchy, and her role in maintaining that connection between past and present. Queen Camilla had walked the full length of the royal guard, her gaze steady and her posture composed. She had observed the precision, the discipline, and the dedication of the guards. The ceremony was unfolding beautifully, and for a moment it seemed as though everything was aligned perfectly, as if history itself had paused to witness this display of tradition. The sunlight glinted off the polished helmets and buttons, reflecting the effort and care that went into every detail. Camilla allowed herself a faint, approving smile, believing that the inspection was progressing without flaw. But as she prepared to give her final nod of acknowledgement, a small disturbance caught her attention. One of the guards, positioned near the center of the formation, hesitated for a fraction of a second. His hand, meant to rise in perfect unison with the others, lingered behind, and his polished rifle slipped slightly in his grip. The pause was brief, almost imperceptible, but in the context of such a disciplined ceremony, it stood out sharply. Camilla's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in careful observation. Every detail mattered, and even minor missteps could disrupt the flawless image of the royal guard. The young guard's eyes widened as he realized the error, a subtle flush spreading across his cheeks beneath the polished helmet. The ripple of imperfection spread almost instantly. Another soldier, noticing his comrade's delay, adjusted his position mid-salute. The timing faltered ever so slightly, creating a chain reaction down the line. A few other soldiers hesitated, their arms moving out of sync by the tiniest fraction of a second. To the untrained eye, these were minor discrepancies, but to Camilla and the trained observers around her, they were glaring. The perfection she had expected was momentarily disrupted, and the impact was magnified by the ceremonial significance of the moment. Camilla's expression remained composed, but inwardly a flicker of surprise passed through her. She had anticipated flawless execution, yet human error had subtly intruded upon the ceremony. Her mind raced, assessing how to handle the situation with grace and dignity. The eyes of the assembled courtiers and photographers were on her, recording every subtle gesture, every fleeting emotion. Any visible sign of frustration or disappointment could make the moment seem harsher than intended. She needed to maintain composure, to acknowledge the dedication of the guards while absorbing the reality of the minor missteps. The ceremonial band continued to play softly, attempting to maintain the rhythm and atmosphere of the inspection. The music's gentle flow contrasted with the sudden ripple of human error in the guard formation, highlighting the imperfection against the backdrop of tradition. Camilla noticed the delicate tension in the air. The guards stiffened slightly, aware that their mistake had been seen, their expressions carefully controlled to mask nervousness. The young guard at the center struggled to regain his poise, moving with heightened attention to realign with the formation. For Camilla, the moment was a delicate balance between observation and acknowledgement. She understood that the guards were trained professionals, yet even the most disciplined individuals were human. Mistakes were inevitable, particularly under the gaze of royalty and cameras. She allowed herself a measured pause, her eyes scanning the formation with quiet scrutiny. Her focus shifted between the minor errors and the overall discipline of the line. While perfection had been briefly disrupted, the ceremony still reflected the dedication, effort, and training of the soldiers. As she continued along the line, Camilla's mind analyzed every detail. The subtle delays, the tiny hesitations, and the minor misalignments were all part of the unfolding story. She could see the nervous glances exchanged between the soldiers, the micro-adjustments they made to maintain the appearance of unity, and the disciplined effort to restore synchronization. The energy in the courtyard shifted subtly, from smooth rhythm to tense awareness. The guards were trying to recover, while Camilla observed with a combination of expectation, patience, and quiet authority. Her gaze lingered on the young guard who had caused the initial ripple. She recognized the effort in his eyes, the determination to correct the misstep without drawing further attention. Camilla felt a mixture of empathy and understanding. This was a human moment, a reminder that even in the most disciplined environments, mistakes were inevitable. Yet in the ceremonial context, Even small lapses could feel amplified. She reminded herself to maintain poise, to convey respect for their dedication while acknowledging the minor disruption with dignity. The surrounding courtiers whispered quietly among themselves, some exchanging knowing glances, others observing in silent anticipation. Photographers adjusted their cameras, capturing the subtle tension in the line of guards. The moment, though brief, seemed to stretch, as if time had slowed to highlight the human imperfection amidst the grandeur of tradition. Camilla's posture remained composed, her hands resting gracefully at her sides, her eyes attentive. She was aware that her reaction would set the tone for how the moment was perceived both in the courtyard and by the public. One by one, the soldiers adjusted. Their movements became more synchronized, their posture regaining its precise alignment. The ripple of imperfection gradually faded, replaced by the disciplined unity that defined the royal guard. Camilla acknowledged this restoration with a slight nod, her expression calm yet subtly commanding. She understood that leadership in such moments required patience, composure, and the ability to recognize effort rather than focus solely on error. The ceremony continued, yet the brief disruption had added a layer of human realism to the otherwise flawless display. Despite her composed exterior, Camilla felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Pride in the majority of soldiers who had maintained perfect alignment mingled with mild disappointment at the minor lapses. Yet she reminded herself that this was a shared experience, a moment that connected the present to centuries of tradition. The guards, dedication, their efforts to recover, and their disciplined presence were all worthy of acknowledgement. The ceremonial significance remained intact, even as the human imperfection introduced a subtle twist to the story. The Queen's attention shifted to the reactions of those around her. Courtiers remained poised, their faces neutral yet attentive, while spectators craned their necks to glimpse the proceedings. Some whispered softly, speculating about the minor disruption, while others observed quietly, noting the careful composure maintained by both the Queen and the guards. Camilla understood that public perception was important, and she consciously projected calm authority, ensuring that the moment was interpreted with dignity rather than criticism. As she reached the midpoint of the formation once more, Camilla allowed herself a brief reflection. The ceremonial lapse had reminded her of the human element in all displays of discipline. Tradition, training, and history were important, but so was understanding and patience. She recognized that the guards were performing under scrutiny, under the weight of centuries of expectation, and that their minor missteps did not diminish their professionalism. This awareness helped her maintain equilibrium, balancing authority with empathy, expectation with understanding. Camilla's eyes then caught a subtle exchange between two soldiers near the front. One was quietly encouraging the other, a slight nod, a barely perceptible gesture of reassurance. This small act of solidarity underscored the human aspect of the ceremony, the camaraderie, the shared responsibility, and the commitment to maintain unity despite minor errors. Camilla smiled faintly, appreciating the depth of character and teamwork that underpinned the ceremonial display. It was these human moments, often invisible to the untrained eye, that gave the ceremony its enduring meaning. The music shifted slightly, a gentle crescendo that marked the approach of the ceremonial conclusion. Camilla prepared herself to give the final acknowledgement, her posture straight, her gaze steady. She moved deliberately, ensuring that her presence conveyed both authority and grace. The guards, having regained their composure, stood at attention once more, their movements synchronized, their expressions disciplined. The brief disruption had passed, but its memory lingered, a subtle reminder of the delicate balance between human effort and ceremonial expectation. As the Queen extended her hand in the final salute, she noticed a few last minor hesitations. A glove was slightly misaligned, a helmet tilted faintly, and a polished rifle wavered for a split second. The imperfections were small, yet in the ceremonial context, they carried weight. Camilla maintained her calm demeanor, her gesture precise and deliberate. Her eyes met those of the soldiers, conveying recognition of their effort, acknowledgement of the minor lapses, and the unspoken message that dedication mattered more than perfection. The salute was held for a few moments, long enough to convey respect, recognition, and ceremonial authority. Camilla observed carefully, noting the return to synchronized precision, the subtle adjustments made by the guards, and the disciplined effort to maintain composure. The human element, though briefly apparent, had been absorbed into the overall ceremony, adding a layer of realism and depth. The moment was a testament to both the dedication of the guards and the leadership of the Queen in maintaining calm authority. As she lowered her hand from the salute, Camilla allowed herself a faint exhale. The tension in the courtyard eased, replaced by the rhythm of ceremonial music and the quiet discipline of the guards. The moment of human error had passed, yet its impact remained in subtle ways. The brief ripple of surprise, the minor adjustments, and the fleeting awareness of imperfection amidst perfection. Camilla understood that leadership required the ability to navigate such moments with poise, balancing observation with empathy, authority with understanding. Walking back toward her aides, Camilla reflected on the experience. The ceremony had been largely successful, yet it had contained a small, memorable disruption. She felt a mixture of pride, awareness, and quiet amusement at the unpredictability of even the most disciplined situations. The royal guard had performed admirably, yet the brief lapse had reminded her that human effort, dedication, and tradition were intertwined, and that even minor imperfections could add depth and humanity to ceremonial display. Queen Camilla had walked back from the line of royal guards, her posture still regal, her expression composed, yet inside, her mind was alive with reflection. The brief disruption during the salute lingered in her thoughts. Though minor, it had been noticeable, and in the presence of courtiers, photographers, and spectators, every subtle movement was magnified. She understood the importance of the moment, not only as a ceremonial duty, but also as a reflection of the traditions and expectations that surrounded her. The weight of history pressed gently upon her shoulders, reminding her that even small events could resonate far beyond the courtyard. As she reached her aides, they offered polite nods and subtle smiles, acknowledging her calm handling of the situation. Queen Camilla returned their gestures with a composed nod, appreciating their quiet support. She was aware that the ceremony was being recorded and would be shared in various ways, reaching audiences beyond the palace walls. This awareness heightened her sense of responsibility. She had to project confidence and dignity, not just for herself, but for the institution she represented. A minor lapse in protocol could become a talking point, and she understood the need to maintain grace under scrutiny. Despite the minor error, the majority of the royal guard had performed with remarkable precision. Their dedication, discipline, and attention to detail had been impressive. Camilla recognized this quietly, appreciating the effort that went into each movement, each posture, and each aspect of the ceremonial display. Yet the ripple of human error had created a subtle shift in the atmosphere, an almost imperceptible tension that had made the ceremony feel more alive, more real. It reminded her that perfection, while admirable, was ultimately human, and that leadership required balancing expectation with understanding. The Queen's thoughts drifted to the young guard whose hesitation had sparked the ripple. She remembered the slight flush on his cheeks, the nervous glance, and the determined effort to regain his composure. Camilla felt a pang of empathy. This soldier, like all the others, had trained for years, committed himself to the ceremonial standards, and yet, in a single moment, a minor lapse had occurred. She understood the pressure he felt, the responsibility carried by every guard under the watchful eye of royalty. It was a moment that reminded her of the humanity behind the uniform, the personal effort behind the disciplined exterior. Courtiers began to move forward, signaling that the ceremonial inspection was drawing to a close. Camilla acknowledged their presence with a polite nod, maintaining her serene demeanor. The ceremonial music continued softly, blending with the distant murmur of spectators and the gentle rustle of the palace gardens. Each sound, each subtle movement, contributed to the rich tapestry of tradition unfolding around her. Camilla took a deep breath, allowing herself a moment of reflection on the delicate balance between ceremony and reality, tradition and human imperfection. The cameras captured every angle, recording the Queen's composure, the guards, discipline, and the fleeting moments of disruption. Camilla knew that the footage would be analyzed, shared, and perhaps even discussed widely. She reminded herself that how she responded mattered more than the minor error itself. Her calm handling of the situation conveyed strength, patience, and poise. It demonstrated that leadership was not just about demanding perfection, but about guiding, observing, and understanding the human elements within structured tradition. As the final moments of the inspection approached, Camilla gave a final nod of acknowledgement to the guards. Her gesture was deliberate and dignified, conveying respect and appreciation for their dedication. The guards, having recovered their composure, returned the salute with renewed precision. The alignment, the posture, and the unity were restored, signaling that the ceremony, despite its brief disruption, had concluded successfully. Camilla's eyes met those of several soldiers, silently communicating her acknowledgement of their effort, resilience, and dedication. The courtyard began to quiet as the ceremony drew to an end. Courtiers guided the queen toward the palace steps, where a small group of senior officials waited to escort her to the private chambers. Camilla walked slowly, taking in the surroundings one last time, reflecting on the performance, the effort, and the subtle human moments she had witnessed. She recognized that the minor lapse in the salute had not diminished the overall ceremony. Instead, it had added depth and a sense of realism, reminding everyone present that even in the most disciplined environments, human effort was the foundation of tradition. Once inside the palace, away from the eyes of the spectators and cameras, Camilla allowed herself a brief moment of quiet contemplation. She sat in a modest, elegant chair, the sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Her aides and advisors stood nearby, ready to discuss the event, the ceremonial details, and any public communications that might follow. Camilla listened attentively as they recounted their observations. They spoke of the guards, overall discipline, the brief ripple of hesitation, and the reactions of the spectators. Each word was carefully measured, yet Camilla's mind was already reflecting on the human story behind the ceremonial display. She thought again of the young guard and the subtle pressure of performing under scrutiny. Camilla understood that the ceremonial misstep, though minor, could feel significant to those involved. She recognized the courage it took for the guards to maintain composure after the disruption, to correct their alignment, and to complete the salute with precision. These moments, though not dramatic in the conventional sense, revealed character, resilience, and the human spirit behind the uniform. Camilla felt a renewed sense of respect for the men and women who served in the Royal Guard, recognizing the effort, dedication, and pride that defined their role. Word of the minor disruption began to spread quietly within the palace and among courtiers. Some whispered about the unusual ripple, while others reassured themselves that it was a natural human occurrence, nothing more than a brief lapse in an otherwise flawless display. Camilla observed their reactions, understanding the delicate balance between perception and reality. Leadership, she reminded herself, was as much about guiding interpretation as it was about observing action. How she handled the situation in private and in public would influence perception, setting the tone for understanding, respect, and acknowledgement of human effort. The queen rose from her chair, straightening her posture and adjusting her gloves. She addressed her aides with calm authority, discussing the observations and planning the next steps. Camilla emphasized the importance of recognizing dedication, understanding human effort, and maintaining the dignity of tradition. She spoke about how minor imperfections were natural, how they could be used as opportunities to strengthen discipline, and how composure in response to unexpected events was a measure of leadership. Her words were deliberate, conveying both wisdom and empathy, reflecting the lessons she had learned from the ceremonial experience. Later, in a quiet reflection with her senior advisors, Camilla considered the broader implications. The public, she knew, would eventually see reports or images from the inspection. There might be speculation about the minor lapse, curiosity about the brief disruption, or even amusement at the human imperfection. Camilla understood that the narrative could easily shift if not managed thoughtfully. She resolved to maintain a focus on the dedication and excellence of the Royal Guard, highlighting their commitment, discipline, and ability to recover gracefully from a brief human error. The young guard, meanwhile, had returned to his duties with a mixture of relief and renewed determination. Camilla learned later that evening about his efforts to regain composure and maintain synchronization with the formation. She felt a sense of quiet pride in his resilience, understanding that the moment, though challenging, had revealed character and professionalism. This acknowledgement reinforced her belief that leadership was not about punishment or reprimand for minor errors, but about recognition, encouragement, and understanding the human element within structured tradition. As the day drew to a close, Camilla reflected on the ceremony, the minor disruption, and the overall experience. She understood that moments like these were not failures, but opportunities for growth, learning, and reflection. The ripple in the Royal Guard's formation had reminded her, and everyone present, that tradition, discipline, and human effort were intertwined. The Queen recognized the importance of composure, empathy, and acknowledgement in maintaining authority and respect, ensuring that the ceremonial significance remained intact despite minor imperfections. By evening, the palace was quiet, the sun casting long shadows across the gardens. Camilla walked slowly along a corridor, considering the day's events. The minor disruption during the salute had been a brief, almost imperceptible moment, yet it carried lessons that would remain with her. She thought about the young guard, the subtle adjustments of the formation, the resilience of the soldiers, and the composure required to manage both public and private perception. The experience reinforced the enduring values of patience, understanding, and dignity, all of which were essential to her role. As she prepared for the evening, Camilla allowed herself a sense of satisfaction. The ceremony had been largely successful, the guards had demonstrated remarkable discipline, and the minor lapse had been handled with grace and poise. She recognized that perfection was an ideal, while humanity was reality. The blend of the two created a living tradition, one that connected the past to the present, maintained dignity, and allowed space for growth and learning. The Queen felt reassured that her handling of the day's events had reflected leadership, empathy, and awareness, qualities essential to her role as a figure of authority and continuity. Finally, Queen Camilla took a quiet moment to reflect on the lessons of the day. She thought about the significance of tradition, the dedication of the Royal Guard, and the importance of human effort within ceremonial contexts. She considered how minor disruptions could become meaningful moments, offering insights into character, resilience, and composure. The ripple during the salute, though small, had created a story of perseverance and dignity, reminding everyone present that even in the most disciplined environments, humanity remained at the core. As night fell over the palace, Queen Camilla felt a sense of closure. The ceremonial day had ended, the guards had returned to their routines, and the palace had returned to its quiet dignity. Yet the lessons lingered, the understanding that perfection was rare, that human effort mattered most, and that leadership required both observation and empathy. Camilla knew that she had navigated the day with grace, maintained composure under scrutiny, and acknowledged the dedication of the Royal Guard in a manner that preserved dignity and respect. In this way, the minor disruption had transformed from a moment of tension into an enduring story of tradition, resilience, and human excellence.